Hey, welcome back to the Invisible Strength podcast. Today's guest went from a fast paced finance career in New York City to facing life threatening complications from lupus nephritis. But her story didn't end there. She's now a professional yoga instructor leading transformational retreats in breathtaking locations like Riviera Maya, Mexico. Victoria Gibbs is living proof that when autoimmune diseases disrupt our lives, it can also open doors to dreams that we never thought possible before these conditions. Today, we'll hear Victoria's transformational journey and explore how movement, mindset, and lifestyle can help us live well with these conditions. Victoria, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited and so grateful to share.
We're excited to have you. And Chris, thank you as always for being here today. How are you doing?
No, it's always a joy to be here with you. Excited to get a chance to hear Victoria's story. I think it's going to be awesome to hear.
Victoria, before we get into the complications in your journey with lupus nephritis, can you tell us about yourself as a person?
Yeah, I'm very social, very vibrant, easygoing. I love fashion. I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and I started dancing classical ballet at the age of 4. So I've always kind of had a love of movement. And I was on a pre-professional track through high school, and then an unfortunate knee surgery took me off of that path. And so my parents and I decided that the best thing to do would be to go to college. So I continued to lean into my schoolwork, but I always had a very serious mindset when it came to academics and ended up going to Dartmouth College, where I danced as part of the ensemble there, which was a very wonderful experience. At first, I was very stubborn and didn't want to do it because it wasn't classical ballet, it was more modern and contemporary. But once I joined, I found a new love for modern and contemporary and realized that I just have a true passion for movement, whatever that may be. And so that was a wonderful experience. And then life happened. I moved to New York City and worked with a physician for a while and then in finance for 6 years. Then eventually found myself doing yoga. I mean, I always practiced yoga, but I never thought it would actually become a career. So I'm very surprised that I have been able to make it a fruitful career. It has taken some time with a lot of setbacks, but I'm very grateful to be doing it. And just the connections that I've made along the way have been really inspiring and motivating and rewarding in so many capacities.
That sounds wonderful. When you talk about making a change in modality, like, the professional that you were, living in New York City, what sort of like fear or doubts or emotions were you experiencing when you realized yoga's not just something I want to do just as a hobby, but I want this to be like a core aspect of my life? Like, what trepidation did you experience?
I honestly wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it. I didn't really understand what it entailed. I didn't understand how much work it would be. I just knew that I loved yoga and I wanted to share more of it in a deeper capacity. And so I was very fearful because I'm not someone who likes to fail, although failure is obviously a great opportunity to learn and build and grow and change. But my parents is also at the time were not keen on me becoming a yoga instructor. They
Hmm.
very much said, "We did not send you to Dartmouth so that you can become a yoga instructor."
Yeah.
And so having to deal with their lack of support initially was very hard. And I realized at a certain point that I had to do what was going to make me happy. And I realized that, like anything else, there are ups and downs. But if I just keep pushing through and just keep going, that it is something that I can do and I will do. And various opportunities started presenting themselves. And so over time, my fear started to decrease. But there's always a little bit of fear, honestly, on the day to day. Even today, things are wonderful, but you just never know what's going to happen, especially with me living with a chronic illness. I don't know if my body's going to hold up. And so that's something that I think about quite often and try to assess how I can parlay my passion into something else that perhaps doesn't require so much physicality. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating because I think about chronic illnesses just being something that rob us of so much mobility. Meanwhile, yoga is something that requires so much mobility. So, how are you kind to yourself when that move you're trying to do for yoga is being hindered in some form or fashion by your chronic illness?
I slow down. I realize that if my body is not performing something the way in which I know that it can, it's time for me to take a step back and lean into a little bit more rest and self care. And as much as I would not like to do that, I realize that it is inevitable. And there are times where I've tried to push through those signals and it has turned out not be a good thing. Taking a day or two of rest in the short term is a lot better than having to take off 2 weeks down the road because I've tried to push myself to a limit that my body just can't handle. And so it's just trying to figure out a way to make peace with having to slow down and be okay with it. And it took me a while, but now I listen to every signal, and no matter what it is, I will slow down. I will take the day off as best as I can. I do have to teach, so I'll show up for class, but other than that, I won't embark on a physical practice. In between classes, I rest. I stop at home. I have my matcha. I lay down, close my eyes, and set an alarm so that I can get up for the next class.
And it's got to have the matcha.
Yes, I must have the matcha.
For us go-getters who have a personality where slowing down is difficult, it's such a process for us to listen to our bodies and know when we need to rest and actually rest. Um, Along with that, such a process transitioning from a traditional finance background and moving into being a yoga instructor. What was happening behind the scenes that was triggering that change in careers?
I realized that I wasn't passionate about it. I adored my colleagues. I thought they were lovely people, and I enjoyed the work environment on a social level. But when it came to the work itself, I did what I had to do, but I wasn't seeing any growth. And even though I requested, changing roles and taking on more responsibilities, it still was not being heard. And, I worked in an office of all males and we were all Ivy Leaguers. So everyone had some sort of ego. And despite the numerous conversations that I had about wanting to take on more responsibility, it never happened. And I felt like I was not really living up to my true worth in finance. And I mean, there were times where I thought I can leave and look for another firm and try again and see how opportunities present themselves. And I did start applying for other jobs. And oddly enough, social media was becoming quite popular at that time. And I was very present on social. And so when I was Googled by some of these firms, they were concerned that I was too committed to social media and that I would not show up in the office the way in which I should. And
Mm,
so it became a bit of a hindrance. And so I decided that it was not anything that I genuinely wanted to do anymore. Even at my original firm, when I realized that I wasn't getting the responsibilities that I wanted, I kind of checked out. I would take very long lunch breaks and go take a yoga class in the middle of the day and reappear towards the end of the day. And I think everyone knew that I just wasn't in it anymore. And I don't know if they ever understood that a lot of it had to do with the fact that I didn't feel like I was being taken seriously. And I mentioned initially that I love fashion. I mean, I don't look very fashionable right now, but I love
all good.
fashion. I would come in well dressed, but like in colorful suits and pencil skirts. And I don't know if it was too much because everyone else was just wearing black all the time. And the office culture, everyone kind of did what they wanted to. People just took breaks when they wanted to. They went on vacations with 2 days' notice. And it was a very interesting environment. Eventually, I threw in the towel, and that was in the end of 2018. I threw in the towel.
It's funny because I think about the ways in which, particularly, you see this when college students are at internships, where they're just this is the job I'm supposed to do. Like I remember I did an internship with this corporation in Manhattan, and I was like, here it is, like we're on our way up, and then sitting there in that cubicle, I was like, this is absolutely what I do not want to do. I'm never going to be here ever again. And it's something about we know in the midst of all the sort of external pressure and all the expectations people have for us, and, talking about that Ivy League culture and certain projections people have for you. But this is something that's almost like a calling, something that is really just like a core part of yourself. So, when did you first realize that you like deeply loved yoga in this way?
I guess it was probably around 2016. I was practicing every day, even on the weekends, and committing multiple hours on the weekends to practicing. I would take a 90-minute class followed by a 2-hour advanced class, and I just loved it. I loved the community. I love how my body felt. I love what it did for me mentally more than anything else. I had so many mental struggles over the years, and therapy never did what yoga has done for me. And so I realized that it was transforming my life in so many ways, and it was something that I knew I wanted to share with people. So initially, I did it through my social media content, but eventually, after I completed my teacher training, I realized that it was where I wanted to take my career.
Hmm.
Your yoga journey has evolved through the years, most definitely. Can you take us through your health journey and how that has impacted your movement and yoga journey throughout the years?
Yes. So, when I was deeply committed and realized I wanted to do more with yoga was actually when I was diagnosed with lupus. I was diagnosed in June of 2016, and I had to stop yoga completely at that time. And I could tell in my practice, the months leading up to my diagnosis, that things were a little bit off. I used to practice a lot of Bikram yoga in a heated room of 104 degrees, and my body was not sweating anymore in the room, which I knew was a huge sign that something was definitely off. And then even some of the postures that I would do, it just didn't feel like it used to. But I kept pushing through. I just figured it was a phase and that, it would eventually change. And it wasn't until I was competing, I used to do yoga competitions, which sounds like an oxymoron, but really for me, it was a competition within myself because I
Yeah.
know uh, it's all mental. I mean, a very strong yogi, but just that moment of getting on stage with the lights on you, you can hear a pin drop, it's silent. That's that's when the mind can start to race and you don't necessarily perform up to your own expectations. And so for me, it was just a challenge to overcome that mental aspect of the competition. So I kept doing them year after year. I always did very well, but in 2016, I was on stage and the lights went on. I was at the national competition in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And the days prior to that, I was very swollen. I had mouth ulcers, night sweats. I never should have got on that plane from New York to go to Jackson Hole, but I'm so committed that I had to go. Once the lights went on, I collapsed on the stage. I couldn't see anything. Everything just kind of faded to black. I was doing an inversion and just kind of slowly crumbled to the floor. I
Yeah.
got up, I finished the routine, but everything was just a complete blur, and I had no idea that light sensitivity was a thing, but that's exactly what happened. As soon as the bright lights went on, everything kind of faded to black, and I just was going through the motions because I knew I should, or I knew I wanted to. I definitely shouldn't have, but I did, and, my body responded and wasn't happy, and so
Yeah.
I went through the rest of the competition, but the same thing happened when I went on stage the following day. I managed to qualify for day 2 by some miracle, and after I got back on the plane to return home, that was in May, I didn't step foot back into the studio because my body was failing. My hair was falling out. I had terrible fevers of 104, 105 degrees. the mouth ulcers. I had blood blisters on my fingers,
Yeah.
and everything was just failing. And I started to lose my motor skills once the end of May came and June started. And I was having brain fog. I was blacking out in Manhattan, not knowing where I was. It just kind of muscle memory that really got me through that time. I believe because I would get to my office building, and this is what, like, the doorman told me once I got better, but that I would ask them what floor I worked on, and I would go sit at my desk, turn on my computer, and I would get a pounding migraine. I turned off my computer, I looked back at my colleague, I told him, "I'm going home. I don't know what's going on, but I have to go home." And so, it was very rough, and honestly, I didn't know if I would even get back into my practice, but thankfully I did at the end of the summer, in 2016, and yoga has been that resource for me that allows me to know exactly what's happening with my body. I've cultivated such a deep mind body awareness that anytime something is even remotely off, I can tell. And I feel like it even happens prior to any blood work that I get done. I can notice things happening before my blood work catches up. And it has been kind of a saving grace because I don't know if I would have been able to overcome as much without my yoga practice or maintain such a positive mindset or be so resilient. But it's the one thing that keeps me going and really just has been so transformative. So as my lupus transforms, my yoga transforms, and I'm not as intensely practicing as I used to. I mean, I'm now 40. I turned 40 a few days ago. And so I just want to be nice to my body and not force it to do anything it's not already comfortable doing. If I learn something new, great. But as soon as I feel something, I take it easy. I slow down. I just go into gentle mode, whether that's gentle stretching or just doing nothing at all, but going for a walk.
Mhm.
It's been very much a journey finding the balance between keeping up with my passion, keeping up with my work obligations, but also listening to my body and giving it what it needs.
I'm really fascinated by the mindset that you're talking about and just wondering, especially about the way in which, you just talked about times when you're not feeling 100% and you have to be more gentle. How do you quiet that competitor? Because I can hear it. Because I'm still tripping off competitive yoga. I was like, I thought the whole point was just to be as mindful as possible. Like I'm more mindful than you. It's kind of wild to me. But how do you balance that competitive nature out and just let it say, okay, you take a back seat because today we have to be gentle, we have to be tender, we have to really just not push ourselves too far. Like how do you find that balance?
I think that it has taken a lot of time to get to that point because initially I would push through everything, and then, a couple weeks later, I end up in a hospital bed for 3 weeks on steroids being pumped into my body and, having to rebuild and regroup and I almost feel like it's like learning how to walk again sometimes when you get out of the
Right.
hospital because 'cause you're so swollen from the steroids, you don't feel like yourself, and so I think having a lot of those previous experiences have made me wiser and have given me patience and peace to kind of just accept where I am on any given day and not push through because it's not worth it. And I've learned that the hard way multiple times that I know now nothing is worth it.
One of my one of my favorite quotes from one of your YouTube videos, one day you could be the size of a house and the next day you
Mm.
can be a skeleton without really changing anything that you're doing. How have you navigated just the unpredictability of some of the flares and complications that have come up along the way?
It's hard because it just interferes with everything and then you don't feel like yourself, which I think for me is the hardest part. And I have to be in front of the camera a lot for work and people facing all the time. And so I'm just always putting on a good face, whether I look like this or like my normal self. And it's it's been very hard. Have journaled a lot about it. I think expressing my feelings in that way has been very helpful for me in learning to cope with the unpredictability of it. And at this point, I'm so used to it that nothing phases me at this point in time, which I think is probably a good thing, all things considered. But in the moment, it's about having a resource to express how you're feeling. And a lot of times, you can talk to your best friend or you can talk to your parents, and everybody means well, but nobody actually understands what you're going through. And the only people who understand are other people going through their own chronic illness issues. And so, I don't have a best friend who has a chronic illness, and I don't really have anyone that I pick up the phone and call regularly. So I just journal a lot, and I actually use my social media to share quite candidly what I'm going through, how I'm feeling, and the various ups and downs. And I think so having that resource to share, whether it's social media or whether it's journaling, I think has made a huge difference for me because if I didn't have a place to share, I don't think I'd be so at peace with the various trials and tribulations that come along with the disease.
I love that. With journaling, sometimes you go back and reread and like you surprise yourself. What is a place or what is something you're doing now that would have really surprised you at another part of your journey?
What am I doing now? I'd say cultivating more time for self care. I would lean into self care when things were getting bad and I could tell that they were getting bad, but making it more part of my daily routine. I mean, every day it looks different just because of schedules and things like that. But just finding moments to sit with myself, sky gaze, go for a gentle walk, like look out at at the cityscape. I live near the water, so I can walk by the water and just kind of take it all in and just find moments of peace and serenity on a regular basis versus before I would just go into panic mode and like do things hoping that it would quickly heal things. But I mean, at that point, it's too far gone. So I think making a concerted effort to lean into self care on a regular basis. Even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's drinking your daily matcha, whatever it is, make it a routine, make it a ritual, and just enjoy the moment.
Love
I
that.
appreciate that perspective of self-care. It can be as little as taking 5 minutes and a little break, and that can be enough to just reset and recharge.
Absolutely.
Totally.
You had mentioned you're in front of the camera a lot. Your Instagram is impressive, but
Thank
you've
you.
openly said you are more than pretty backbends. How do you balance the aesthetics and your passion for fashion with the physical challenges of dealing with an autoimmune condition?
When I'm flaring or something is actively going on, I always share that very candidly. I will post the swollen photos. I will
Hmm.
post, the mouth ulcers or the Raynaud's or whatever is happening in that moment. And I think that, it's important for people to see that I am a real human too, and not everything is rainbows and roses, but that I have my own issues that I'm constantly dealing with on a day to day. You know, I show up for the camera and I show up whether I look swollen or whether I look like my normal self. I think that openness has allowed people to feel comfortable coming to me and sharing whatever they're going through. Or, after heart surgery, people reached out to me sharing so much that they were inspired by my story. They were inspired that I shared tubes in my nose and tubes in my chest and just me like hooked up to ventilators and everything like that. It's a reality. And I think people need to see that. And I do believe it brings more visible awareness to the autoimmune community that otherwise people would not necessarily see. And so for me, it's of the utmost importance to be completely transparent about whatever I am going through when it's happening, If I'm at the doctor, I take a little video of them, drawing blood, or if I need that MRI, I get a photo with the MRI apparatus and like post it on my story. And, just so people know, like I'm constantly having to think about this and it's not something that, one day just goes away. It's always going to be lingering in the background. And it's sweltering hot in New York now. I'm walking around with an umbrella and all the things to protect myself from the sun because that eventually can turn into a flare as well. And so there's always something to think about. And the more I can share that candidly, it gives people more perspective to see that, yes, she can do the things, she can back bend, she's got cute clothes, but, she's going through real stuff.
That it seems to be number one is extremely commendable, but it just seems to be so antithetical to what social media often is used or how it's used. It's just
Mhm.
like it's like highlight reel where like you're never gonna see me unless everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. You're never gonna see me anywhere but my highest. Like what sort of feedback have you gotten from folks who either, are inspired by the vulnerability and authenticity or just like, wow, like I can't believe you're just like so honest about it. Like, they're kind of shocked of it. Not even necessarily critical, but just like shocked by it. What sort of feedback do you get from your audience?
I actually get really great feedback. People always send such positive comments or positive DMs and thank me for being so honest and putting out the photos and speaking so candidly and sharing resources that work. I think more than anything, I think my mom is probably shocked when I share so much on social media. She's like, why are you putting that out there, sweetie? And I'm like, Mom, because the people need to know. I'm like, this is who I am. I'm like, you can't change me now. It's too late. So probably love her to death, but is probably the only one who is ever really shocked. And maybe some other family members are too. They just
Yeah,
don't share it with me, but I'm not going to change it. I think it's very rewarding and it inspires and motivates people just like conversations like these. And I taught at the solstice in Times Square and part of which is like a huge yoga event here in the city. And part of my bio is that I have lupus and, had open heart surgery. And after class, so many people came up to me sharing their stories with cancer or that they have some sort of chronic illness or know someone who had lupus. And I just love that kind of community and connection. And it gives people a safe space to feel like they can talk openly because look at this person on stage teaching the class and she's so vulnerable. I can be too.
yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned that there is always something that we're needing to think about. What would you say to someone early on in their journey who are struggling with the fact that there is no cure and this is indefinite?
I would tell them to make the most of it, turn the frown upside down, or, the glass is not half empty, it's half full. Optimism, I think, is very key, maintaining complete positivity, even throughout the biggest challenges. I think is of the utmost importance, and just make peace with your situation. There's never anything to be ashamed of. Everyone's going through something. They may not be vocal about it. Their fix might be a little bit easier than something like lupus or any chronic illness. But I think that it's important to just be at peace, be okay, be patient with the process, be grateful for life. And don't stress about anything. Everything has to run its course. It's here today, gone tomorrow, gone in a week. And just kind of lean into a little bit more self love. And one thing I will say is routine conversations with doctors. I mean, once things are fine, don't neglect seeing your doctor. I think it's important to stay connected to them even when things are good, just to kind of check in because you never know when something is going to appear. And the medication is rough on the body. It's very rough and it has repercussions that we don't see coming because I've personally was on steroids for so many years and now I'm having to worry about my bone health. So I'm going to see an endocrinologist. And these are things that I wish I knew a lot earlier that I mean, I knew my bones would be affected at some point, but I wish one of my doctors had said, go see an endocrinologist, go see this person, to kind of stay ahead of the game because you can ask for what you want a lot. I asked to start a biologic way sooner than I did. And unfortunately, it's too little too late. Like the steroids did their damage on my body. And now I have to worry about a potential hip replacement in my right hip because my bone is dying because of lack of blood flow. And, you know, they want to operate now. And I said, sorry, not doing it. Wait it out and see what happens. And I feel like while things happen, just stay positive. I'm staying very positive about it. I'm not rushing to do anything. I'm going to let time run its course, let things maybe heal on their own. Anything is possible. And I think a lot of it's mental. If you think doom and gloom will come. But if you kind of stay upbeat about things and make the most of the situation and just mindfulness, I think that's really important. Just stay aware. Don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. I wish I had spoken up a little bit more, and I already think I'm pretty vocal about what I want. And I'm having to deal with this now, but I'm just going to take it in stride one day at a time and literally one step at a time, never rush the process. Don't think too far ahead. It gets too overwhelming, too stressful. I stay in the present. If you ask me what happened yesterday, I couldn't even tell you. And I don't worry about what's happening tomorrow until the morning. So, very much in the moment.
Just thinking about that whole sense of like mindfulness and just, really just approaching each day for what it is. So with that in mind, what sort of like hope do you have? Like what is something that you're like, going back to that sort of like competitive, ambitious part of your brain, what are your hopes for your work and where do you aim to see this all going? Obviously like prioritizing your health, but what are some of the things that are still driving you in your work?
What's driving me is just wanting to build more of my presence around the city, find more opportunities to share my story, to share my practice and the transformative power of yoga and how it has truly helped me change my life. I'm doing the hustle very hard right now because I had to take off a year and a half after heart surgery, followed by shingles. And I really needed time to just heal. And so I will stay on this hustle for about another year and a half, no more than 2 years. It's definitely a lot. And I'm in a phase of working smarter, not harder, and opportunities are presenting themselves where, I can just keep to my regular teaching schedule and not necessarily pick up additional classes for other people. And I long term want to have my own podcast and share a little bit more. I'm starting to blog regularly just about my life updates, and looking to start a Substack, a lupus focused Substack. I mean, I'll
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about other things, but I think the one thing that separates me from every other yoga instructor is that I have lupus and I still show up every single day and I will keep showing up for myself and I will keep fighting and I will keep pushing through. And there's nothing that can stop me at this point. I'm like, if I can deal with heart surgery, I can deal with a little hip thing, I can deal with anything. So just figuring out how to build my brand a little bit more because I want to be able to share my journey with lupus on a bigger scale. And I just think that it's important for people to know that they can still live a good life while having a chronic illness. But you have to believe that.
Hmm.
If you don't believe it, it will not happen. And I am a huge believer in manifestation. I think I manifest quite a bit. So I am on the path in which, I am meant to be and things are unfolding the way in which I envision them. And I think, little by little, it's just going to keep coming and I'm going to get to my end goal of just, you know, focusing on sharing lupus and the resources. And I think yoga is a really great catalyst for me and how it has served me so well as a resource in managing my lupus. And so I'll never like lose yoga. I will always forever be yoga. It's like I love movement. It is my passion, but I think that the journey of lupus is stronger and needs to be shared. It's my biggest challenge, but also my greatest strength. I think it has awarded me a lot of opportunities because people do see that I am resilient and I managed to bounce back from even the most insane lupus surprises. And, it hasn't slowed me down and it never will, and I won't let it. So I think that, the journey of lupus needs to be shared, and I'm going to share it in a bigger capacity down the road.
Victoria, you truly are the epitome of invisible strength. Appreciate your ability to pivot and flex with this condition so that you can go on and keep chasing your dreams. You're truly inspiring.
Question.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And, it's great opportunities like these that give me the space to share and get me one step closer to my next goal. And I'm just really grateful to be here and connect with you both.
It's an honor.
Where can people
Mm.
find you on Instagram and elsewhere?
Instagram, my hashtag is, or my handle is what gives. So WHAT and my last name GIBBS. And that is my primary thing. And then my website is victoriagibbsyoga.com. And so I would love to hear from people. I love connecting. I love hearing stories. I love sharing my story. I love providing advice. I mean, what works for me might not work for someone else, but I'm always happy to share. And, it might take me a moment to get back, but I get back to everyone. It's very important to me that everyone feels seen and heard because, much like the title, it is invisible, and you never want anyone to feel invisible. And so it's really important for me to take the time to get back to each comment and each DM and email.
Thank you, Victoria. And to each of you who tuned in today, thank you for being a part of this group and helping each other figure out how to live well with these diseases because it's not easy. Thank you, Chris, for being here.
I always enjoyed to be here and hearing this tremendous story. It just made me think. I was trying to remember the whole Camus quote, but something about like in a winter of despair, I found an invincible summer. That's all I kept thinking about with what Victoria was saying. So just thank you for your strength and just such a powerful story for sure.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. Until next time, take care. Peace.
Peace.